Hello, everyone, and welcome to A New Direction. My name is Jay Izzo, and oh man, do we have another great show for you. The book, excuse me, called The Switched On CEO, author Stephen R. Falk wrote it. Let me just ask you a question out there, all of you. Have you ever just lost it? You know, where you just, like, you know, here you are, you're running a company, you own a company, maybe you're in that position. And have you ever just, for whatever reason, you started spewing things out of your mouth that you had no idea where they came from, and then you're coupled with regret about what you said, and you sit there and you go, why did I even do that? Would you like to have an answer to that? I think we all would, right? And not only would we like to have an answer to that, I think we all want to know, well, what can I do about it? How do I fix that? How do I fix that moment where I got triggered so badly that I lost my mind and my mouth at the same time? And even your behavior. Well, that's what this book, The Switched On CEO, is about, with Stephen Falk, who joins us. It's an outstanding book. And I will tell you something like this. I put books at different levels of this bookshelf, right? And they're all good. Every book I've read, which is, you know, what I read, 50 some odd books a year for the show. And they're all good, but some of them get placed higher up on the shelf than others. Top shelf book right here. Something that I know that I can use, something that I know you can use, something that if you learn the techniques and things that Stephen is talking about in this book, you're going to be able to pass on not only to your people at work, but in your home, to your friends. It is that applicable. It is something that will change your life, but has the capability of changing other people's lives. And I firmly believe in it. So let me tell you about Stephen Falk. Stephen is the CEO and founder of Switchback Systems Corporation, a Canadian full-service consulting digital metrics company with global client base. Prior to Switchback, Stephen owned and operated a successful marriage and family therapy practice for 22 years. God bless him. He holds a Master of Arts degree. And Stephen gained international recognition through his work in the natural resource sector, helping reduce fatality and injury rates in high human exposure environments. He is in demand as a keynote speaker. So, you know how I feel about my fellow speakers. Hire him. I can tell you he's fantastic. At regional and national conferences, he focuses on presentations and how to leverage the human brain to revitalize teams and organizational cultures. Stephen's ability to take complex issues and transform them into profound but simple to understand diagrams is what sets him apart in the industry. You're going to see that today. And you know what? This book is outstanding. He's the author of it. It's his latest work. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the show, Stephen Falk. Welcome to A New Direction, friend.
Thank you, Jay. Great introduction. Let's get rolling.
Let's roll on this thing. So let's talk about it. The very first thing I want to talk about, I think we need to just do a little bit of background, not just a little bit, because the chapter one is the good old days are gone. And the good old days are these days of the, I call it the alpha dog leadership days, right? Where it's the alpha dog, a little gruff, a little angry. You see it that way too. So if those days are gone, what days are we in right now?
Well, we're in the days where leaders have their greatest leverage if they can self-regulate. Meaning, they can be in the heat and keep their head. So there's, like, in the good old days, like if we use, I'm Canadian, of course, so use the coaching metaphor. In the good old days, the coach used to be able to go in the dressing room, take all the sticks and throw them around, and everyone got all fired up, and then they went out and scored a goal. Right. Those days are over. You did that once or twice in a season and you've lost the room. And that's the same thing with the boardroom or managers. If you spaz out like that, thinking that you're exercising this alpha dog, you know, really grabbing your turf and peeing on the peeing on the hydrant and, like top tail. It's just not that. It's not the most powerful leverage tool in your toolbox.
Yeah, we like to default to that though on so many occasions. I feel like it's still, even though those days are gone, there seems to be some sort of sense of a default mechanism that I think we're going to talk about here. Well, I know we're going to talk about here, where if we get fired up enough, if I get mad enough, well, that's going to get everybody's attention. And I want to just speak as psychological colleagues here for a second. Sadly, it seems that we operate from such a punishment paradigm, which you and I both know is a quick fix, but not a sustainable one.
That's right. Yeah, you're not building team with punishment fear model. You're building compliance, obedience, right. Short term,
right?
But you're not building what we call capital team.
Right. And if Seligman taught us anything, Dr. Martin Seligman taught us anything, you punish enough, we get learned helplessness.
That's right. And then people are out of team. So within our model, we say, as leaders, are you drawing people in a team or out of team?
Right.
That's as simple as we can boil it down. And that big alpha dog model, actually, at the end of the day, doesn't draw people into team.
Right. And there's two things I think that you talk about that we should fundamentally talk about too. That's going to be a theme throughout this book. And there's two things. One is a growth mindset, that we've got to believe that you can change, but others can change, right? Which is critical to your model here. And then the second thing is team. So let's talk about those two things, because that is going to be a central theme throughout this book.
My wife, we were having lunch together just before this call. She goes, "Steve, don't go weird." don't scare Jay's listeners, okay? So
you're not going to do that.
I understand what you're saying. So what she means by that is don't say what I'm going to say right now. The days of Myers-Briggs are over. You take that thing behind the barn and just shoot it. Yeah. The personality profiling, actually, does it build team or push people out of team? I think that overall, that Myers-Briggs model, I mean, you may disagree, and this is why my wife says, "Steve, don't go there, don't do it." Is Myers-Briggs, in as much as it might have been reasonable at one point, people weaponize it now, and they use it to stay out of team. I'm an introvert, so I stay out of team. Oh, I'm an extrovert. That means I can talk over people and interrupt people. Oh, I'm this. And our model says, just stop all that for a minute and let's build a principle that says people can change, neuroplasticity. We can create a common target, whether it's a family, a hockey team, a corporation, and that common target is something that we all try to achieve, which is team.
I'm going to speak to the Myers-Briggs thing a little bit here. Not out of really disagreement, but really more out of that it has become something that it was never intended to become. Mm-hmm. They treat it as a personality inventory, but this is from a Jungian typology standpoint. Mm-hmm. And merely what he is saying is that there are certain behaviors that we have a preference for in these different areas, yes. These 4 different areas. It's not a personality inventory. It just can give us a pretty good, it was supposed to be, this gives me a pretty good idea that this is probably how you'll behave under most circumstances in certain dimensions. In this case, 4 dimensions. But it was never intended to be a personality test. And the fact that it's become a person, I have the same issue with the DISC test, by the way.
Yes, me too. They both kind of make me angry. I feel patronized by it.
The DISC makes me angry.
Yeah.
I hate the misuse of it. I do think it can be appropriate in terms of if I take that dimension and go, okay, and I look at introversion and extroversion and go, okay, well, you can be a little bit of both. Maybe you lean more towards, I get my energy from being by myself, most of the time. But sometimes I like being around people and being the center of attention, and I can do that. That was the point of the test. The point of the test was not to pigeonhole you, but that's what it became.
Yes.
It's become this. That's what makes me mad about the test.
More importantly, we pigeonhole others.
Right.
That's what really bothers me.
Yeah, right. And so I am not disagreeing with you. I am in fact agreeing with you. I think it can be appropriate. It's just that in the wrong hands, it's a horrible tool.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
Because if we go back, like one of the first pillars of Switchback is people can change neuroplasticity, which means if you have a tendency to withdraw from conflict, to hide in a cave,
right.
That's sure, realize that, get that self and situational awareness.
Right.
But now what are you going to do about it? Are you going to build your career on that model as a CEO, close the door and hide?
Right.
Play with your mouse and look at rearrange, or like, are you going to say, no, people can change. I know what the target is. The target is I need to be visible. I don't need to have pom-poms, but I need to be visible. And so I will set my alarm twice a day. I'm going to get out of my office and walk around the corporate headquarters and just stick my head into people's offices and say hi.
Right.
That's what we call mental toughness, regardless of what DISC and what Myers-Briggs tells you what you're allowed to do.
Right. And again, I think it's the misuse of it. It is what angers me so much, is that I can get some useful information. It's nothing's permanent. It's just that, okay, this tells me where you're at right now, at least on this dimension.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. On this dimension.
Yes.
But it doesn't say anything to me about your overall personality. And because I do believe that we have so much plasticity, and for those at home who are playing and listening at home or watching us on TV, DBTV viewers, thanks for watching us. When we say neuroplasticity, we're just meaning that the brain can alter and change. It can repair and it can do all sorts of things, beautiful things within itself. It has the ability to do that. And we have the ability to make a lot of headroads on that if we're willing to adopt a growth mindset that says, I can change, but then I have to take it even further, and other people can change, because part of our belief has got to be also that other people change. Don't you agree?
And Jay, here's the novel part. There are a ton of leaders that they're so worried about being pre-decisional in their models. So they think, wow, at this stage, if I'm not going to be the alpha male, everything has to be collaboration. And that is just the death of a lot of organizations.
Yep.
If you've ever been in those meetings, they're just like, oh, it's terrible. So I think neuroplasticity, absolutely believe that you and others can change. The next one, though, is, do you have a target that you're all shooting for? Have you agreed to what a functional, healthy board meeting looks like? Have you agreed to what a functional, healthy email looks like? What customer relations looks like from a healthy, what a hockey team looks like. Right. Like play it anywhere. And I think there's this real, people are backing away from having a bold sense of target. This is who we are. This is how we want to operate. Please self-regulate into this space.
And you talk about this target in terms of, I guess we could look at it in terms of rules, regulations, human factors, and systems, right? That all have to play a role as we try to aim for our target.
Yeah, I would say if you want to use the terminology, so we've just put on a quadrants model because it's easy. So the y-axis we look at.
Yeah, let's do the 4-quadrant model.
Sure.
Because I think it's easier to explain, and I think it's also, it really unfolds. So let's just jump to the 4 quadrants.
Sure. So if you can just picture like a 4 square, just same as you've seen in other business books as well. So the y-axis, which is the vertical axis, we're just going to put rules, regs, and systems there. And this is a model that just revolutionized the logging industry in British Columbia. This one simple framework. It literally took a medical incident rate from 10.5 down to 0.4. Which is just means that we killed 4 less people a year, meaning we didn't kill anybody for a number of years in a row, which is just remarkable. So on the y-axis, you have rules, regs, and systems. So high is high quality on the top, 0 on the bottom. And then on the x-axis, we just call it team in a relationship, but that's a human factor piece. So the goal is to go for that corner on the top corner. We just call it quadrant 2. I know it's not the right math, but that's where we put it. So which means if you're reasonably high in your systems, your rules and the regs, and you're reasonably high in your human factor communication. Most CEOs if we just direct it to that direction, because it's like a leadership podcast, they are subject matter experts in their field on their career path to the C-suite. So they're an engineer, they're a lawyer, they're an accountant, and then they become a CFO, and then eventually become a CEO. The great thing is that they have developed all these technical skills. The downside is those technical skills sit on the y-axis. So it's the rules, regs, and systems that they become very proficient and professional at. They pop themselves into a leadership role, and all of a sudden, they're not the subject matter expert anymore. Their subordinates are the subject matter experts. And now their job, they're actually their only job, is to build trust and clear communication among the team. They're not the CFO anymore. They're not, operations. They're not on the floor. And that skill set is a very different skill set than being a subject matter expert. And a lot of CEOs, because they're probably going to be mid-career, midlife when this takes place, when they graduate into this awesome arena, it throws them for a real loop. Mm-hmm. Because now all of a sudden they're like, what am I doing? I feel like all I have is people problems. I feel like 80% of my job is HR. Mm-hmm. And I used to be an engineer that was really good at designing things at a technical level. Now I've got this drama around bullying and harassment and this other thing and pay equity and people stealing from the company and on and on. And so part of it is, we say in Switchback, we say, if you can set a target for what does it mean to become a leader in this new iteration, you realize I can't just rely on my technical skills. I need to also develop these human factor skills. And they're developable. You can develop, that's a great term. You can develop them at any stage in your life. Like they're available because of neuroplasticity. But it's a shift of mindset where all of a sudden they have to become fascinated with the human dynamic, not just the technical systems. When you find a CEO that embraces both of those, the y-axis, technical excellence, and then is fascinated by the human dynamic, they're the total package. There is what we would define as world-class.
I want to dig into this quadrant. Can we dig a little bit deeper into this quadrant system? Are you okay with that?
Sure.
Because the thing about this quadrant system that I'm fascinated by, and just to remind everybody, imagine you got 4 boxes, starting at the top left, box 1, top right, box 2, underneath box 1 is box 3, and then box 4. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, just 4 boxes. And the vertical axis is rules, regulations, and systems. And then the x-axis is the team and relationships piece. The thing that fascinated me is that if you're a leader in, like, let's say you're quadrant 1 leader, right? Mm-hmm. Which is high rules and regulations, low team and relationships, right?
Yeah.
Your biggest fear about moving from quadrant 1 to get to quadrant 2 is a perceived loss of control.
Yes. You got it exactly right, Jay. And then the inability to actually, let's say, schmooze the group. Right. You don't think you have and you probably didn't have it in elementary school. You didn't have it in junior high. You had a hard time getting a date in college. And so you never really had that human factor confidence about your style.
Right. And then, and here's the thing. So you're up in quadrant 1 and we're trying to get to quadrant 2, which is up in the far right corner, is the box in the far right corner. But we got another problem because we have leaders, and we just kind of mentioned this, is the quadrant 4 leaders who are at the very bottom corner, high relationships and team, but low rules and regulations.
Yeah, that's your outside sales team.
Right. And their fear is loss of freedom.
Yeah, they're driving around in their leased Raptors, those Ford trucks with the great Baja suspension that they can't afford. So they're over leveraged in their personal lives. They tell the biggest stories in the world, and they're often like fairly good at drinking to grease the wheels of business. And they're making these great sales, but to get their paperwork in, to actually review their texts before they send them, so there's not errors, for them to be technically on top of things and working team is terrible. But they are like, they look at themselves and they defend that quadrant 4 as like, no, man, if without us, man, you guys are. all the nerds in quadrant 1 wouldn't even have a business. Like, we're the ones that are actually shaking hands and kissing babies and making this happen. Woohoo.
Right.
So part of it's a lack of respect of each other's space. But the bottom line is people can change. And we think outside sales needs to be in quadrant 2, not in quadrant 4.
Right. They need to have rules and regulations as well as their team and relationships.
That's right.
And this is where I think, but I don't want to ignore quadrant 3.
Yeah.
Because you say these people tend to solve problems through avoidance, addictions, and overreactions.
Yeah.
And their greatest fear is being found out as lacking and losing their job status.
Oh yeah. It's that lots of people talk about the imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
So they might have an outward appearance of control, competency, but they have this internal fear of I mean, you and I were probably masters at it in the early iteration of our adult lives, right? Because we were the unlikely heroes of our own story.
Right.
And so we had quite a bit of imposter syndrome. And I actually personally, I got a pretty big rush off the adrenaline of not doing my homework or being outed. Like when I got outed, like, oh, now I'm living. I can feel the murder. I can also feel the suicide at the same time. It's like, wow, I'm living the dream now.
Yeah.
All I would have had to do is do my homework, but no, I set myself up so I get this big chemical dump in my brain.
Waited till the last minute, man.
Yeah.
Right. That was the thing, was waiting I got the adrenaline rush from waiting to do the assignment the last possible second.
Yeah.
That was my rush.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that was the thing. And that's that bottom lower quadrant 3. And we want to get to quadrant 2 where this person cares about others.
Yeah. Hey, we bump into quadrant 3 also with companies that are growing and people that are advancing their careers. So that great example of the quadrant 1 technical leader, let's say CFO, that all of a sudden gets the opportunity to be the CEO. They don't get to stay in quadrant 1. Right. They actually go down to quadrant 3 because they don't have the technical skills to be the CEO leader. And because they don't know legal.
Right.
They don't know operations. They don't know HR. Like there's all these areas they don't actually know. So they can't speak with authority. So they lose the confidence of being the technical leader. Right. And then they often have a real aversion to like trying to win the team over. So on the short term, they live in quadrant 3 and they hate it because it's chaos and pain. And a lot of them will bail or never put their hand up and go for the opportunity. Or at an organizational level, the company grows and maybe it has like a 40% growth rate in 1 year, which is a lot for any company. There's no way they're maintaining quadrant 2 during that growth cycle. Yeah. So they will dip into quadrant 3 and they'll go, oh, the sky's falling. We're falling apart. This chaos and pain. We're going to die. Not true. This is like, you can't have a 40% growth cycle without dipping into 3. It's real, seeing it, knowing it. I mean, the trick is knowing it's coming, anticipating it, and then accepting it, and then managing your way back up into 3 again, into 2 again, which is that world-class spot where you're organized and you're friendly again.
This is so much fun. I love it. By the way, the book's called The Switched On CEO, How to Think Like a World-Class Leader. His name is Stephen Falk. We're just getting started. You're listening to him here on A New Direction. Hey, folks, got to talk about my sponsors. I've got 2 great sponsors. Zoundy, ultimate game changer for authors, publishers, and professionals in the audiobook space. Listen, here's the deal. If you're an author, publisher, and you put your book on one of those audio book platforms, and you go, God, I hope people listen to my book and they buy it and whatever. Do you know who's actually bought your book and listening to it? You don't, do you? So here's the deal. Zoundy is a way that what happens is you can give your book away for free. Know who the people are who are reading your book because you have their emails, and now you can interact with your audience. So imagine if you're going out and you're speaking to 500 people, give 500 audiobooks away through Zoundy. They got a special code. I have a special code for every for everything. I mean, literally for every social media platform, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, you name it. I've got a code for it. that I can give my book away. People can listen to it for free, and then I get to interact with them. It's awesome. So listen, check it out. Go to Zoundy.com, but then add /J, J-A-Y. And then if you use my special code right here from New Directions, J25, Jay25, Soundy.com /J, J25. You're going to love the savings. You're going to be so glad you did. And Lindencraft Team Realtors, for 40 years, they have been helping people transition in life. And why we say that is because if you think about it, wherever you've lived has been a life transition. They know how to take the stress out of that home buying, home selling portion of it. They've been doing it successfully for thousands of people. They can help you as well. So listen, when you're ready to sell your home or buy your home, check them out, lindacraft.com, LINDACRAFT.com. And we're back here on A New Direction with Stephen Falk and his book, The Switched On CEO, How to Think Like a World-Class Leader. Stephen, before we exit the quadrant system, and we all want to be in quadrant 2, where we got a nice balance between the rules and the systems and relationship and team. I would be remiss if I did not put out what you call the retirement warning, because I felt like it was so valuable. Because oftentimes we get into retirement and we go into quadrant 4, where we think it's all about relationships, and we lose sight of any systems at all. You say when you go to retirement, you still want to be quadrant 2.
Yeah. I know it's a hard pill to swallow, because a lot of people are like, I'm kind of tired of the man and all the rules and the regs and systems and the paperwork and the emails. Like, I'm done with that. In fact, I'm not even sure that I like people anymore. I'm just going to buy woodwork tools, go down in the basement, do my thing. Well, that's isolation. And for a lot of people, you're right. They've lived out their career potentially in quadrant 2. Within 6 weeks, they've slipped into 4. Like the idea is like they're sitting on a beach in Mexico with a drink in their hand. Well, that's a holiday. That's not retirement. And then they end up depressed and sick in quadrant 3. And the actuaries even look at it and say, we're expecting like a certain percentage of people to die within 18 months of retirement because of exactly this quadrant downfall to the bottom of quadrant 3. Yeah. So I would say, let's beat the system. It's so easy to look at. You just need to come up with a new life in retirement. You need to be organized, and you need people.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm working on a project, with a financial planner right now, and we're talking about that very same thing, is lifestyle retirement, in that you've got to have both. You can't just live on the beach forever. Right? There's got to be some rules and regs. You've got to be involved somewhere else. You can't just live off the right side of your brain. I know that's a big generalization, but I know you just can't live there.
Yeah.
We have to have the whole brain engaged. That leads me back to chapter 4, which is the front and back of the brain.
Hey, just before we go by, I was loading up my wheelbarrow with firewood just before this call, right? So I'm walking past where my parents live, which they live on the bottom floor of our house. Right. And they're in their late 80s. My dad's at his desk working. My mom's at her piano with headphones on, playing classical music. That is quadrant 2, baby.
Right. Yeah.
They know that they need to stay. And my dad's like, I can't die yet. I'm only 3/4 of the way through my project.
Right. I love that.
And my editor's driving me nuts, which is his grandson.
Right. But I love that attitude.
That's the one.
I mean, that's why he's living why he's living his life the way he's living.
And I bought him a new lawnmower, like a big ride him, because we got quite a few acres and he wants to mow the lawn. And so there he is, a picture of him, 87 years old, cat in the ball cap backwards, because he doesn't want to get clipped by low branches, full throttle, running this thing very close to the pond. I'm going, this man's living his dream. Imagine if they were living in a condo. I don't think they'd be with us anymore.
Yeah. No, you're right. He's probably got a Vancouver Canucks hat on too, doesn't he?
100%. Don't get me started, though. I've just started riots at Keynote. Especially back in the day when the Canucks lost to the Boston Bruins in the 7th game. When I break that one down for the group to see as to what happened and why it happened and how it could have been avoided, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
It's almost a riot in the room.
All right, let's go to chapter 4, the front and back of the brain. You start off by saying people will make a million excuses for their bad behavior, and it all starts with what you call the X's. Help us understand, what are the X's in the switchback brain theory?
So here's the theory. I mean, it's going to be more complex than this, but the idea is to make it as simple as possible that holds all the weight of the world in a simple diagram. So here's a simple diagram. 2 operating systems: front brain operating system, back brain operating system. The back brain is the fight, fight, freeze response. The front brain, we just put on a continuum of passive and aggressive, but a sweet spot being in the middle. So that's where that world-class sort of target is. So in a perfect situation, you would live your life as a leader at home and at work in that, what do we call the red circle in the front of your brain. You wouldn't be too hot, too cold. You still have lots of variety, and you can laugh and cry and grieve and do all that kind of stuff. But you have human agency, control over your experience, which gives your brain the opportunity to keep growing, growing, growing. Because it's saying, oh, it's not a huge threat. We can grow because it's a fertile spot. It's like a farming model. The front of the brain is like the valley floor. And then we call the back of the brain is like the operating system. We see that as 2 mountains opposing each other. So the higher the mountain, up the mountain you go, the more you're in danger. When it comes to memory storage, we simplify it again. We say the front of the brain stores all the memories that build the storyline that you are successful, beautiful, happy, smart, a good friend. And they interact with each other and they support each other. Any of the memories, whether they be traumatic, real, or perceived, that happen in our lives that challenge that belief that you're smart, likable, a good team member, can't be stored in that storage system because they're in conflict with. And so we call those memory X's, and they get stored on the flight side of the brain. So the way it works out is this way. We build this almost like a working model of our lives where we forward face the front brain persona of us. And a lot of us are good at it, like me, because I was raised in an ethnic minority churchy environment. I mean, holy mo, we were like clean living people. And so we were like front brain, world class, like we had to, or we were beaten, We will beat you into good manners.
Oh yeah, I know that one. Go ahead.
And so that there's the front facing persona, hardworking, head down, reasonable person. Meanwhile, there's these experiences that do not fit into that place in our brain. So they're X's stored in the back of our brains. With the right stimulus, you end up in what we call classic switchbacking, which means you leave the front brain operating system either by percentage, like a 5% adrenaline drip, or by a adrenaline dump of like 45%, or worst case scenario, you literally black out, almost like PTSD. And so you will now have what we call the battle of the brains. The memory X's have their own storyline. They say, you're not good enough. You need to fight. You'll never measure up. You will fail. You always, you never, all this exaggerated language. And the wild thing is they have a limiting belief sort of lawyer cadre that actually support that and say, and if you want some evidence, Your Honor, remember Steve remember Jay when he first year of university? Do you remember this? Remember that? Remember that? Hey, by the way, I remember you talking about, your first marriage didn't happen. What does that tell me? That tells me that you're terrible at relationships, says the back of the brain. Meanwhile, the front of the brain says, hold on, I've been married for 20 years and I'm successful. This is not true. So now you have the battle. Which operating system is going to call the shots? And for most CEOs, they have become very good at what I would call risk management. And so they don't want to be too hot, too cold. They just want to play it real safe down the center. It's kind of like the golden ticket. You've got a 5 or 7 year run in this position with bonuses and stock options and all these goodies. So your goal is not to be spectacular. Your goal is not to blow it. So right away, that's not a mindset, a growth mindset. And so what they do is they try to button down their lives, which makes them more transactional rather than dynamic, which puts you into that quadrant 1 model of a leader. The problem is you're still vulnerable. to those unprocessed memories that are stored in the back of your brain. And I'll give you a good example. We were in the 32nd floor at a board meeting in oil and gas, working with the board of directors, and the CFO, the CEO, pulled us aside and said, we got a meeting just before our meeting tomorrow morning, but our CFO is going to lose his mind, because he does every time when the Australian board talks to us. Because we don't have good quarterly results. It's not looking good. So he's going to absolutely go batshit on this room, and it's going to be really embarrassing. And he's done it his whole career. But we love him because 95% of him is world class. Just as 5% of him is like mass murder. and so we're like, hold on, let's figure this out before the meeting. It's like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Said, okay, and there's a small group, only 8 of us. Go, okay, so what is the X? Because obviously you're leaving your front brain. The stimulus is right, whatever it is, like an authority figure is coming down hard on you with your quarterly results, and the stimulus pushes you out of your front brain operating system into your back brain. You're going to open up one of those vaults, and in that vault's going to be a stored memory. It might be from childhood, might be from somewhere else. Who knows what it is? And there's these lawyers that have a limited belief that sort of build a whole persona around it, and you're going to go from flight to the fight, and you say all these rude things, and you're going to be vindicated by it. You can say, yeah, you're the man, you showed him. But at the same time, you're going to be completely embarrassed and shamed by your behavior. What is it? And they all just lean and goes, are we really going there right now? And says, when else? I mean, your meeting is tomorrow morning.
Right.
He's going like, what is it?
Right.
I stuttered as a kid. And his voice tone completely changed. It's like almost like a super spiritual moment. I stuttered as a kid, and my parents did nothing about it. Like they didn't know how to deal. They didn't think about it. And so the only way I could get words out was by using adrenaline. And so I used the back brain to communicate. And otherwise I would stutter and I'd totally embarrass myself. I said, well, do you still stutter? He says, no. So I said, so when you get adrenaline now, like from the call tomorrow morning, what happens in your brain? He goes, I switch. I go from a 55-year-old CFO making $500,000 a year, not counting stock options, to an 11-year-old schoolboy in England with a stutter. And I completely lose self-regulation. And I hate it. So they go, okay, well, tell some more story. He goes, I've got another layer. He said, I've got a couple kids. One of them stuttered. We got the best speech pathology experts and psychologists working with him. And within a couple months, he nailed it. He retrained, he rewired his brain, and he got rid of the stutter. He goes, that's world class. I wish my parents had done that, but it's back in the day. So then the whole room's like, it's like sparking. It's so amazing. Like they're like, this is it. They go, okay, so what's your game plan for tomorrow? And our first pillar in Switchback is people can change. The second pillar is the power, successes, and team. So he says, well, it's too fresh. I can't rewire my brain in like overnight, but teamwork. And then the whole room goes, we're with you, brother. We're with you, brother. We'll anchor you to your front brain, man. We'll lock you in. We'll harness you in. We'll staple you to the floor. Like, we can do this together. And if we get a sense that you're starting to lose it, we're going to cut you off at Eagle Pass, and we'll just like take over the call like this. And he goes, okay, that's good. That's good. Go. And do you think your front brain has the capacity to take the bad news and take the beating from the board without going, like, if you're fully aware of it, do you think you can self-regulate? He goes, 100% I can. I just didn't see it before. And for sure, I've got some work to do around sorting out long-term, harvesting the X, moving it to the front of my brain and resolving. But on the short term, all I need to do is see it. If I can see it, I can understand and manage it. So of course, before our next day of training, they have this board meeting with Australia. And these guys came into our meeting just higher than high you've ever seen. Because yeah, we won the Stanley Cup. And the Stanley Cup they won was they delivered the bad news to the board. The bad news, the board did their predictable thing of poking the bear and trying to agitate that murder mountain response. And they got nothing. They got world-class, warm, technically strong leader response. That's how you rewire your brain.
That's beautiful.
Oh, it was like, we're like, this is unbelievable.
Yeah. That's goose pimply.
Yeah. And the only thing we get punched at after that story is they go, where the hell were you 25 years ago? Really? Because they're like, I tormented myself, my marriage. I lost a marriage out of this. Like there's, but I could have. There's so much collateral damage from this 5% Achilles heel that I've got going on in my life. This 1 or 2 or 5 X's that I just didn't know how to recognize, see, and resolve and move.
Yeah, that's beautiful. His name is Stephen R. Falk. The book, powerful. Switched on CEO, how to think like a world-class leader. If you just listen to that story, that is phenomenal. It's what he does, and he does it so well. You're listening to him here on A New Direction. Hey, folks, our sponsors. I've talked about Zoundy before. I'm going to talk about him again. I love them because what they do is they have a different model when it comes to the audiobook space. Their model is such that they can capture a contact list, target non-traditional sales channels, generate reviews, network with influencers, engage audiences like never before, simply by allowing more people to have access to your book and you being able to interact with them. So listen, check them out, Zoundy.com. If you're an author, you're a publisher, professional in the audiobook space, go to Zoundy.com, use Zoundy.com/J. Use my promo code JAY25. That's JAY25. Zoundy.com/J, JAY25. And you'll unlock special savings. You're going to be so glad you do it. I love this platform. And I think you will too. And matter of fact, I know you will, because it is the best way to interact with the people who are reading your or listening to your book. It's fantastic. Check them out. And Linda Craft Team Realtors, just got to say this. Check out the website, lindacraft.com. Absolutely phenomenal. I believe it's the best real estate website out there. And I'll tell you why. Not because, because it's got all the bells and whistles. You can see listings and all sorts of things that you're looking for in the area. And it talks about all that's cool. But here's the other little pieces that they do. Like, for instance, they found a child psychologist who wrote an article on how to help move with your kids. Right? They found a veterinarian to talk about moving with animals, right? Moving with your pets. They do a weekly podcast show called Real Estate Right Now, where they're staying up to date on what's really going on. Everything from how the political landscape's changing, how that affects real estate, to commercial real estate, to residential real estate, and so much more. So listen, check out the site. It's really good. It's called lindacraft.com, LINDACRAFT.com. And we're back here on A New Direction with my friend Stephen Falk. The book, The Switched On CEO, How to Think Like a World-Class Leader. I can't speak for everybody out there. I know I've got some people chiming in who are watching live right now. Stephen Weinberg has said great stuff. So just to let you know, Stephen, you've got folks out there saying what you're talking about is awesome. So it's fantastic. I want to stay with these memory X's a little bit, if we can. So one of the things that we didn't talk about, we alluded to a little bit, what happens if we leave these memory X's alone? What if we don't want to deal with them at all?
We run into that with veterans. So we've done veteran training, especially in wildland fire. So there's quite a few veteran crews, like hand crews or hotshot crews, that are all veterans. And when we present this material to them, they're like scratching their heads going, this wasn't our training.
Right.
So our training is lock them in a vault, shut them down. And unless we're really drunk with very safe people, we're not we're not talking about Afghanistan.
Right.
And so I respect that model as a working model. But what I notice is those people overall are tight. They're not loose because they're
protective, really protective.
Yeah. And they never know when they're going to step metaphorically on the landmine.
Mm-hmm.
And when they do, they don't know if their automatic response is going to be sending, someone through the drywall.
Mm.
And that's scary for them and for anyone else. And so as a result, we always ask the question, is your life getting bigger or smaller as a result of your decisions around your worldview and your methodology? And I think, I just love veterans, and we love working with the incarcerated and veterans. So there's incredible programs where incarcerated get experience in wildland fire as well, right? And so shout out to Washington State DNR. I think they're doing one of the best programs ever. If I were to write another book, it would be only on that topic. So anyways, same thing with that, with the incarcerated or with veterans, guaranteed they've got memory X's that us civilians don't even understand. However, if they just lock them into a vault in the back of their brain and hope that they can make through without ever having them pop out on them and sabotage them, our theory, it's humble but kind. We think their world is getting smaller from an opportunity point of view rather than bigger.
Yeah.
And so that's the downside.
How do we move them? How do we move those X's from the back of our brain and deal with them in a way that makes that can help clear? Because we probably have. I'm guessing I have 1.6 billion X's back there. Okay, and yes, I've had to deal with them because I can't deal with them all at once. But or every now and then one comes up, and I'll go, okay, where in the world did that come from? And, I have to do my own research. How do we get that? How do we get those X's out? And where do we put them in? How do we deal with this?
Sure. So I think your grandma probably told you this, forgive and forget.
Yeah.
That's not an option.
Yeah. No, it's not. It doesn't work very well.
So we can certainly forgive, which is the process of moving X's. One option for moving X's is forgiveness.
Right.
But you're not going to forget. So if you're not going to forget, where can you store the X so that it's well supported in team? Our theory is if you can move the X from a back brain isolated cave, vaulted up, to a front brain storage area where it's supported by all these other great assets that you've developed over your lifetime, which is like emotional intelligence and likability and skills and ability, like all those other things that are going on. Then now that X, even though you have not forgotten it, it doesn't have the ability to independently sabotage you anymore. Occasionally, it goes from being an X to a plus sign. So someone has this horrific experience in their earlier life. They move it forward off the mountains to the front of their brain, and it becomes their story, their identifying story that offers healing to others. And so that is a wonderful sort of option. It's not often that can happen. So a couple things. Our brains are designed in a way that they're not going to release 1,500 X's all at once because it'll swamp the boat.
Right.
And your brain probably won't even release the big kahuna X's for starters. They'll just expose like a B level X, and they'll test. Our brains test from a survival point of view. How am I going to respond to this X?
Right.
So this B level X, like you and I are early academic storyline. That'd be perfect for that. So there's an X. And lots of overcompensation and lots of smoke screen stuff to pretend that we're funny, but we're incompetent. And there's all that whole thing going on. And the big question is, are we smart? And so that's a good X to bring down nice and easy. What I have noticed for myself, because I'm not only the founder of Switchback, I'm its #1 client. I think there's a hair commercial like that, right?
Yeah,
I'm not just the founder of the hair products 9500, but I was its #1 client.
I like the company so much I bought it. Yes.
But I truly am that guy. And when I study myself, both the X's that I have successfully moved, it's usually not my friends and family that are helping me. It's usually random people. I don't know. We have such a poker game already established with our spouses and our kids and our friends and family that often we don't have the negotiating power to negotiate an X out of the back of the brain to the front of the brain. But a random person like us, like we do these 3-day trainings all over in the U.S. government system, mostly in wildland fire, or in forestry. Get in a room for 3 days with us where we're doing one-on-ones as well, and we got these 2 consultants from Canada that parachute in and tell these stories about boardrooms and this and X's, and you'd be surprised how willing and able the brain is to see a fresh X, spin it around like a Rubik's cube, and start the pathway down to the front of the brain. And there's the brain, I think, often requires a novel opportunity to shake up the homeostasis. I know I'm using lots of sort of psycho terms, but the homeostasis is our friend and our foe. So it's that desire to get a pattern of predictable control. And we all need it. Otherwise, we don't have a civilization. Like, I like it that people drive on the right side of the road between the mustard and the mayonnaise. I appreciate you all that do that, because that keeps my life going too. So we love homeostasis, but it's our foe when it comes to dealing essentially with X's or trauma. Because we figured out a way to manage everything so that we don't trigger the X, so that we don't expose ourselves to it. But typically that makes our lives smaller rather than a growing mindset. Okay, so how to move it first is keep your antenna up for novel opportunities like this podcast right now. This is like a perfect example of a novel opportunity. You might love Jay, but you've never met me. So let your brain go, okay, Stephen Falk, Jay seems to trust him. He's read the book. There's something. You just ask yourself, what opportunity, what can I move right now? The next one it's very simple. It's just exposure therapy. So no different than dealing with an allergy. You want to expose the X, all the nuances of the X, to the front brain. If I would use an example of a Rubik's Cube, your back brain has a one plane understanding of the experience. Your front brain can spin, because it's more complex, can spin the Rubik's Cube to all the different sides and angles and planes. So it's really only your front brain that can resolve the X. The thing that you think is unresolvable, says the back of the brain, this is unresolvable, leave it there. It's just going to create a mess if I bring it out into the open. That's a singular, one-dimensional view of the issue. Your front brain, along with team, has the ability to spin that and see all the nuanced differences. As soon as your front brain gets that sovereignty of the X, that X just literally comes down the mountain like butter. Because it wants to, I know I'm personifying a memory now as if it's an entity, but it wants to be resolved. We were designed to heal and forgive. We really were. We weren't designed to end up bitter and full of anger and resentment and brittle. That was not the grand design. The grand design that we stay alive. And so on the master plan, we get X's because we live a dynamic life. They're unavoidable. Some of them we can't sort out until we're adults, because you're not going to sort out a trauma X as a kid when you're a kid, because you don't have the oomph to do it. But for you and I and your listeners that are adults, we now have the human agency to, with team and support and our front brains, we have the ability to bring these X's out of their hiding places and spin them around and resolve them and bring them into the front brain. My personal goal is to be basically have them back brain mountainside free of X's. Yeah. And that to me is like, heaven on earth.
We've done an hour. It's been awesome sitting with you here today. I want to do another hour, but I can't.
Just keep it rolling, brother. Just keep it rolling.
How do people get a hold of you if they'd like to learn more or reach out to you in some way? How can they do that?
Sure. So Switchback OS for operating systems, switchbackos.com is our website.
Okay.
That's probably the best way. If you hit contact me or contact us, it's an email that comes right into my inbox. So that's a pretty direct route right to us.
Perfect. Thank you. Will you stay with me, please? Folks, it's a show. I say this to you every week. You had a lot of choices. You chose us. Thank you for doing that. I want to remind you, you're in control of three things at all times: your attitude, your effort, and your resiliency. The fact of the matter is that life is not always fair, and it doesn't always deal us the hands that we want. But you still can control your attitude. You still can take control of your effort. You choose your excellence based on your effort for that day or that moment. And you choose your resiliency to get back up again, because we all get punched in the mouth or punched in the gut. But it's up to you to get back up again. And we need you to get back up. Why? Because we believe you're worth it and we want you on the team. I'm going to be back next week with another great guest. It can be another great book. It's automatically another great show. Thank you so much. Give us a thumbs up on YouTube. Wherever you would listen to the show, give us a positive review. As I say to you all over the world, you know what that is. Ciao, everybody.